Part 44. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 431. After chatting in the imperial garden, the two quickly returned to the palace. The northern frontier envoys had different expressions, looking at Duan Muguiu with a bit of inquiry, really curious about what she talked about with the Queen of Ziki. However, Duan Muguiu ignored them, and the monarch, ministers, host, and guests sat down in order according to their status and etiquette. The palace banquet was boring, nothing more than some occasional words, hypocritical or polite. 9 out of 10 were perfunctory. During the banquet, the envoy mentioned the northern frontier emperor Duan Muyu, and Chu Qinghuang dismissed him with one sentence, "The northern frontier emperor? I have never seen him." The topic was declared over before it even started. The expressions of the northern frontier envoys were a little ugly. Of course, the reason for the ugly look was not because of the emperor's affairs, but the attitude of Her Majesty the Queen of Ziki. It was clear that they were not taken seriously. But they didn't say anything. The envoys who escorted the princess to the northern frontier this time were all selected by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. The purpose of the Crown Prince was just to confirm Ziki and to find out if his father had a chance to go back. This will make it easier for him to judge whether he should ascend the throne forcefully or send troops to conquer Ziki to show filial piety. However, from the attitude of Her Majesty the Queen, it can be seen that Duan Muyu's chance of returning to the northern frontier should be small, and she said "I don't know," which seems to mean that there is no need for negotiation. So everyone felt at ease. After the banquet, Chu Qinghuang sent Chen Hai, the chief steward of the inner court, prepare a quiet residence for Princess Duan Muyu, and settle the other envoys. "Don't neglect the guests. Your Majesty, please rest assured." Chen Hai led the palace people to settle the guests, and Hongyu met Duan Muguiu at this time. Looking at this girl up close, Hongyu secretly thought that his vision was right. The little princess of the Duan Mu family looked like a fairy no matter how he looked at her. Look at her skin, so tender that you can squeeze water out of it. "I heard that you fell in love with me at first sight." Duan Muguiu stopped and looked at the absent-minded Hongyu coldly. His voice was as cold as the coldest days of winter, and water would turn into ice. "Do you know how to please me?" Hongyu's expression froze, and he looked up at her in disbelief. When their eyes met, he saw the coldness in the other's dark pupils, and an inexplicable sense of familiarity came over him. Little fairy? The girl in front of him was indeed beautiful and refined, but when she opened her mouth, where was there any fairy temperament? "You may have misunderstood." Hongyu smiled stiffly and couldn't help but back off. "I'm not interested in pleasing anyone, and I didn't fall in love with you at first sight. No need to deny it." Duan Muguiu interrupted him, "Stay by my side and serve me in the future. If you do well, I will make you a servant." Hongyu's expression froze instantly. He can't escape the fate of being a servant in this life, right? Being her servant is not as good as being the husband of Her Majesty the Queen. Hongyu frowned. "Sorry, I am now working in the Imperial Observatory. My duty is to pray for good weather in Ziki, pray for the people of the world, and pray for Her Majesty the Queen. I have no idea about the love affairs of ordinary people." After saying this, he turned and left. "You have to agree, whether you agree or not." Duan Muguiu ignored his thoughts at all, and his tone was particularly tough. "You looked good in red before, but this dress of fame and fortune is not suitable for you now. Wear red in the future." "Before?" Hongyu's heart skipped a beat, and he slowly turned his head, with shock in his eyes. He stared at Duan Muguiu's face, which should have been innocent, and couldn't believe that there was such a magical thing in the world. "You." "It's me," Duan Muguiu said coldly. "Don't you recognize me?" As soon as the voice fell, the expression on Hongyu's face was completely frozen. Why is he so unlucky? Why did he have to offend a demon? Hongyu turned around and left without looking back. his steps were so fast that it seemed that some ferocious beast was chasing him. Love at first sight? A fairy who is not stained by the fireworks of the world? Screw his love at first sight, screw his fairy, he is probably blind. He has never been so blind in his life. If his Hongluan is such a demon, he would rather die alone. What kind of joke is Yu Lao playing on him? Is he deliberately making trouble for him? Hong Yu fled back to the Imperial Observatory, hurried into the secret room, and began to tell fortunes. He must figure out what kind of evil this Duan Muguiu is. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 432. After the order arranged for the distinguished guest, Chu Qing Huang finally calmed down. Returning to Changming Palace, Chu Qing Huang looked at the silent Fukang. Don't worry, she no longer has the ability to hurt you. I'm not worried, my subordinate Fukang's voice was calm, and he looked no different from usual. My subordinate just lost his temper briefly after knowing her identity, and then he had no idea. Chu Qing Huang hummed, her temperament has changed a lot during this time. Fukang pursed his lips and said with gentle eyes, what the master said today, all the subordinates heard it. Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows, what did I say? The master said that the country can be given to her, but I belong to the master. Fukang looked at her steadily, with a sea of affection in his eyes, full of joy and emotion. It turns out that this subordinate already has such a heavy weight in the master's heart. My subordinate must have done a lot of good things in my previous life, so I have the opportunity to meet my master in this life. Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows, maybe you were a good person who saved the common people in your previous life. I think this is possible. Fukang nodded, otherwise, there wouldn't be such a great blessing. Chu Qing Huang silently walked to the window and sat down. Seeing Duan Muguiu today made me overturn my previous impression of her. When I first arrived in Ziki, I faced hostility from all sides, and I never thought of investigating her. Thinking about what happened in the past, I still feel that her violent temper is not natural. The more restrained a truly violent person is, the more severe the backlash will be. But I only see calmness in her. Although her beautiful and fragrant face cannot hide her natural indifference, there is no hint of violence. Fukang had no interest in Duan Muguiu at all, and didn't want to talk about her too much. His mind wandered for a while, and then he returned to the previous topic. The weight of my subordinates in the master's heart is already equal to that of a country. Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows, are you so moved that you want to pledge yourself to me? Fukang's voice faltered, and then he nodded, yes. In that case, can I help you tonight? Fukang's expression was silent, and then he shook his head firmly, no. Before getting married, you must not offend your master. Don't call yourself a subordinate in the future. It sounds annoying. Chu Qing Huang said, you don't have to always put yourself in a humble position. There are distinctions between status and inferiority, and you can be equal emotionally. Fukang was silent for a moment and nodded slowly, yes. Hong Yu is probably going to be disappointed. Chu Qing Huang held her chin and frowned, the little fairy in his eyes is essentially a cold-faced evil spirit. It was the first time he fell in love with a woman at first sight, but he made such a scene. Oolong, I don't know what he is thinking. Fukang said nothing. Although he didn't like Hong Yu jumping around in front of him all the time, he was so deeply persecuted by the original owner that he still didn't have any good impressions of that woman. He couldn't predict what would happen to Kurha after being with her. Chu Qing Huang sighed softly, when I saw Duan Muguiu today, I was relieved. Things like seizing a body are not common sense. If she has any ideas, I have to make preparations in advance, at least it can ensure that you won't be wronged again after it happens. As for the rest, she wasn't worried. After all, even if she doesn't have a body like Chu Qinghuang's, as long as she survives the destined catastrophe for a few years, it shouldn't be a problem to return to her own body. The process may be a little more complicated and require some energy, but she is of noble birth, and there is not much difference between being a princess and a queen. The only variable to worry about is Fu Kang. Now that this variable no longer exists, Chu Qinghuang feels that whether or not he can go back is no longer important. Anyway, if Duan Muguiu doesn't come back, she can't let Chu Qinghuang die like this and leave a mess behind. Ziki. As for Dongling, the people closest to her know who she is now, and it's fine to just let everything go. Chu Qinghuang put aside her worries and raised her eyes to see a certain shadow guard looking at her for an instant. The tenderness and brilliance in those puppy-like eyes were almost overflowing. With such a pause on his expression, Chu Qinghuang reached out and knocked on his forehead. "Don't be so moved, I am doing it entirely for myself. After all, with you by my side, my future life will be colorful." Subordinate. Fu Kang was about to speak, but when he thought of what Chu Qinghuang had just said, he was so annoyed that he immediately changed his words. "I am very happy. No matter who the master is for, it is enough to prove my weight in the master's heart." Chu Qinghuang hummed, "As long as you are happy." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 433. It was true that Fu Kang was very happy, but Hong Yu couldn't be happy no matter what at the moment. Returning to the Qintian prison, he entered the secret room and began to ask the gods for fortune-telling. However, after calculating and calculating for countless times, the hexagrams could not show the ending between him and Duan Muguiu. The usually optimistic and cheerful young man now had a grimace on his face and murmured to himself, "God must be kidding me. How could that evil god be my destined wife? Yu Lao can't even pull the red string. Can I be happy with her? What's the use of having a face? Is this to force them to become resentful couples?" Hong Yu threw away the lot and lay on the ground, speechless as he asked the sky. No. He should go back to Dongling, to King Yu's fiefdom, and ask his father to find him a gentle, kind, and lovable little girl as a good match. His father is very powerful and should be able to change this for him. A marriage. Your Majesty's destined disaster can be changed, so why can't his marriage be changed? He wanted a beautiful and lovely little girl, not a female Rakshasa who could whip anyone at any time. There were footsteps outside. Master Zioxian and Master Bai of the Qintian supervisor walked up to the secret room of the attic and said with a smile, "There is a message below that the newly arrived Princess Duanmu of northern Xinjiang asked you to make a fortune for her." What? Hong Yu sat up instantly. "I won't go. Master Zioxianan is superb in hexagram skills and is famous. Even the Princess of northern Xinjiang comes here because of his fame. This shows how advanced your cultivation is. How can you not go?" Master Bai was puzzled. "That Princess of northern Xinjiang is an extremely beautiful little girl. I heard that she is not in good health. Maybe she wants adults to calculate her lifespan." Not feeling well, Hong Yu frowned and realized belatedly that the 13th Princess of northern Xinjiang was indeed short-lived. The original owner was weak and probably died of illness, so there was a chance for the female Rakshasa to be born in her. However, in general, her body was probably not as healthy as ordinary people. Thinking about it like this, the corners of Kuryu's mouth turned up slightly. So what if he had a vicious temperament? With her current fragile body, she probably couldn't use force. So why don't you just let yourself make it round and flat? Hong Yu secretly thought, feeling ashamed of his reaction just now. It was not shameful that he, a majestic prince, was afraid of a woman. And she is still a frail woman. Okay. Hong Yu stood up and straightened his robes. My lord, I'm going to take a look and do some fortune-telling for the distinguished guests who have come from afar. Master Bai nodded repeatedly. This is the correct way to treat guests. Hong Yu walked down to the secret room of the attic, asked the person who came to deliver the message, and learned where Princess Duanmu currently lived, then turned around and left gracefully. Arriving at the place where Duanmu lived, someone led Hong Yu into the Zuki Palace gate without waiting for the announcement. Hong Yu looked at the surrounding environment and said calmly, "Fortunately, Her Majesty the Queen is not a womanizer, and there is no royal husband in the harem so far. There is no male favorite, otherwise it would be really inconvenient for Princess Duanmu, a yellow-flowered girl, to live here." Duanmu stood in front of the palace steps and looked at him expressionlessly. "I thought you didn't dare to come." "Why don't you dare to come?" Hong Yu raised his eyes to look at her. Although Princess Duanmu is a distinguished guest from afar, men and women are not intimate. Besides, the distinguished guests naturally have people arranged by Her Majesty the Queen to entertain me. It is not good for us to be too close. Well, it damages the honor of Her Royal Highness the Princess. What is a reputation? Duanmu smiled coldly. "I never care about that stuff." "You don't care, I care." Hong Yu flicked his sleeves. "I am currently cultivating my body and mind, focusing on my magic. My goal is to become the best warlock in the world. I should abandon distracting thoughts, stay away from women, and should not be contaminated by mundane thoughts." "What a joke!" Duanmu looked mocking. "An hour ago, who said you fell in love with me at first sight? Did I put a knife on your neck and force you to say such things against your will?" Hong Yu coughed lightly. "I was joking." "No matter if you are joking or not, from today onwards, you are a member of this palace." Dreaming Hong Yu firmly objected. "I'm not interested in you. If you come to me to tell your fortune, I can tell your life expectancy for you. Marriage and other matters are not among my responsibilities. My cultivation is limited, so it's really a fortune teller. Not coming out." After a pause, "If you have other purposes, I'm sorry that I don't have time to accompany you." Duanmu glanced at him, turned around and entered the palace. "You have no room to refuse. Don't forget that you are originally my servant. If you dare to resist, I don't mind letting others pay the price." Kurha frowned. "Threaten him? At what price?" Hong Yu sneered. "The Ziki of today is no longer the Ziki of the past. Do you think that just by being a princess of northern Xinjiang, you can overturn the country of Ziki? I can't overthrow Ziki, but don't forget whose identity and body the current Queen Ziki borrowed." Duanmu sat down on the chair in front of the screen. His voice was calm and indifferent. "As long as I want." "You can't do it even if you want to." Hong Yu interrupted her threat, "because you don't know the cause and effect of what happened. You don't have the ability to predict events like a god, and you don't have the ability to predict the future. What you said at this time, it's just threatening me." Duanmu said calmly. "Her Majesty the Queen talked to me just now. She said that as long as I want, I can get my body and identity back." Kurha frowned. "Your Majesty would actually agree? She has to give up the kingdom she has finally conquered. Is she stupid?" After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 434. Of course Hong Yu knows whether Chu Qing Huang is stupid or not. He was just not sure whether what Duanmu said was true or false. Hong Yu couldn't accurately calculate everything that happened to this woman, including her words and deeds, her fate, and what she said. Deep down he knew what this meant, but he didn't want to accept his fate. He felt he could still struggle. However, in the final analysis, this matter is only a matter between the two of them, and family and country affairs are matters that concern the world. Originally, the Western Qi ministers and the northern Xinjiang envoys thought that Princess Duanmu came for peace between the two countries. No matter what the people in the northern Xinjiang court were thinking, on the surface at least they yearned for peace. However, no one expected that the battle report would come so quickly and suddenly. On the morning of the second day of the 12th lunar month, the day after Duanmu arrived in Ziki, Chu Qinghuang was discussing matters with the ministers in the court. A piece of urgent information from Mayanbei 800 miles away was delivered to the imperial capital by fast horse. Your Majesty, the visitor knelt down and presented the battle report. The war in Mayanbei is critical. The Prince of Northern Xinjiang has personally led 30,000 cavalry and 100,000 infantry. They have arrived at the border and are attacking our border officers to investigate. He has ordered the Western Qi dynasty to wait for half a month. Please hand over the matter to the Emperor of Northern Xinjiang and ask Your Majesty to make a decision. The ministers were surprised. Is the war in danger? How could it be? Why is it so sudden? Isn't the princess from Northern Xinjiang here to get married? Northern Xinjiang actually mobilized 30,000 cavalry? I wonder if General Qi can handle it. Chu Qinghuang sat on the dragon chair, her expression unchanged. What did General Qi say? General Qi ordered him to inquire about Her Majesty the Queen's intentions. If Her Majesty wants the territory of Northern Xinjiang, he will take this opportunity to invade Northern Xinjiang and strive to destroy Northern Xinjiang within 2 years. As soon as the statement came out, the whole court was in an uproar. So, the urgent intelligence is just to send battle reports, but can General Qi actually handle it? It turns out that General Qi is already confident. The ministers breathed a sigh of relief. It was really a false alarm. Northern Xinjiang has repeatedly provoked them. They should be taught a lesson. King Rong snorted coldly. If we can take the opportunity to capture a few cities in northern Xinjiang, it will be a perfect response to their demonstrations. Chu Qinghuang quickly made a decision. As long as northern Xinjiang takes the lead in sending troops, no matter what reason or method they provoke the war, whether it is upright or conspiracy, let Qi Ling immediately respond. Yes. Although it will take a long time for the imperial edict to reach the border, General Qi has made the most thorough arrangements. He will take action when the time comes to defend and will not sit still and wait for death. Once the two countries go to war, the northern border will not be destroyed and the war will continue. Chu Qinghuang said coldly, tell Qi Ling that I will prepare enough reserve military pay, food and grass, and bows and crossbows for him, so that he can devote himself to the war. Don't have any worries. Yes. Tell all the soldiers that after the war, rewards will be given based on merit. Those who show bravery can be promoted beyond the rank. Military ranks, gold and silver, beauties, everything you want. I receive the decree from my humble position. Her Majesty the Queen is mighty. Retreat from the court. Chu Qinghuang stood up and said coldly, masters from the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Revenue, and the Ministry of War will follow me to the imperial study to discuss matters. I obey the order. When the news reached Duanmu's ears, she frowned and her tone was cold and full of sarcasm. The prince is sending troops. Yes, the personal maid replied respectfully, I have just sent an urgent battle report this morning. Her Majesty the Empress of Ziki has ordered the war to begin. She has issued a decree on the border and will not stop until the northern border is destroyed. Duanmu wiped the dagger in his hand and was silent for a long time. It is unforgivable for heaven to tolerate the death of a king and his son in the northern territory. The maid's heart palpitated and she lowered her head unconsciously. Forget it, these things have nothing to do with me. Duanmu put the dagger back into its sheath. The handle of the dagger sheath was inlaid with a pure ruby. It was immediately obvious that it was valuable. Go tell those ministers, just say His Royal Highness sent troops at this time because he deliberately wanted to kill us. Now that the new year is approaching and the 12th lunar month of winter is approaching, I am too fragile to travel long distances and will not return to northern Xinjiang for the time being. The maid took the order and turned to leave. Duan Muguio narrowed his eyes and stared at the dagger in his palm, his expression cold and distant, revealing a kind of world-weary impatience. I really want to commit suicide. After thinking about it, she couldn't figure out what she was doing in this world. There were so many annoying people, so many stupid people, and she was surrounded by a bunch of brainless rats. Every time she wanted to kill someone, she was always unable to do so. This sickly body is like a piece of trash. Duan Muguio walked to the window and sat down, looking out the window without saying a word. He couldn't help but wonder if the prince of northern Xinjiang had been kicked on the head by a horse's hoof. Now is a good time to ascend the throne, but he is actually stupid enough to send troops to conquer Ziki? Do you want to prove that you are a great hero and a filial son, and to save your father, you will conquer the world in anger? After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 435. The discussion in the imperial study room lasted for more than an hour. After a brief silence, Chu Qinghuang said coldly, "Fu Kang." Fu Kang knelt down on one knee. "My subordinate is here." Chu Qinghuang looked at him calmly. The war between northern Xinjiang and 11 Qi came too suddenly. Qi Ling is leading troops at the border to fight, so there cannot be any difference in reserve food and military pay. My subordinate understands. I order you to be solely responsible for the preparation and delivery of food and grass, without making any mistakes. Subordinates take orders. Your Majesty Wen Xingyun, the Minister of Revenue, said in surprise, the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of War should jointly coordinate the food and grass matters. This person. His name is Fu Kang. Fu Kang has never been involved in these matters. If he is rashly responsible for the food and grass matters, there will inevitably be a chaotic handover. If there is another accident along the way, I'm afraid the consequences will be disastrous. No accidents will happen to the people I personally arranged, Chu Qinghuang said calmly. Fu Kang is neat in his work, fast and powerful. Even if he encounters someone robbing food and grass on the way, he is fully capable of dealing with it. Wen Xingyun frowned, but there is no but. Fu Kang is solely responsible for this matter. Chu Qinghuang didn't want to listen to his ramblings, so she turned to look at Chu Suans. Chu Suans listens to the order. I'm here. You have previous experience in investigating the Julian Mountain tea case in Wuzhou. You are responsible for assisting Fu Kang in this food and grass matter. I obey the decree. Wen Zhan. I'm here. You, like Chu Suans, are responsible for assisting Fu Kang. Chu Qinghuang's voice was calm. This is the best opportunity for you to practice. Let me see your ability and courage. Those who have merit will be promoted to the center after the war. The incompetent people will get out of the court, and no waste will be left around me. I obey the order. Chu Qinghuang raised his eyes and looked at the other adults. The border war is related to the country and the survival of the country. No one should be negligent. I have asked these young people to be responsible for this food and grass matter. It does not mean that you have nothing to do. It should be allocating money, recording what should be accounted for, coordinating the escort plan, and carefully making complete preparations for this escort of grain and grass. No matter who dares to delay in this operation, neglect their duties, and directly take off their official uniform and go home to farm. Go. All the adults hurriedly knelt down. I don't dare. I hope you really don't dare. Chu Qinghuang's tone was cold. The coercion of the queen of a country was fully revealed at this time, and her momentum was frightening. If you say you don't dare, then you should do it to me in private. I won't do anything lightly. After a pause, especially at this critical moment, I will send people to watch all the processes of the operation. If anyone appears in my black box, the consequences will range from dismissal from office to beheading in public. Originally, the ministers of the Ministry of Revenue, the Ministry of Personnel, and the Ministry of War were all more or less dissatisfied because they felt that Her Majesty the Queen's use of young courtiers was too hasty. However, as soon as the words black box came out, everyone felt a little bit dissatisfied. Suddenly it disappeared. They were not afraid of the black box, but they suddenly remembered Her Majesty the Queen's ubiquitous spy. If they really dared to rely on their old age, abuse their private power, and cause trouble for young courtiers in this military pay and food escort matter, they would never be able to escape the Queen's spy. So the little Juju in my heart no longer dared to show up. Everyone expressed their loyalty. Serving Her Majesty the Queen is the duty of all ministers. Long live Her Majesty the Queen. I will never dare to hold you back. Your Majesty, please take a closer look. I must do my best and do my job well. I don't dare to be negligent. My lords, please rise. Chu King Huang's tone was gentler. Only when the king and his ministers are united can Ziki be strong. I hope that all of you will witness the prosperity of Ziki with me. Her Majesty the Queen. Long live, long live, long live my emperor. Chu Suans, Wenjian. I'm here. The officers of the Ministry of War, the Ministry of Household Affairs, and the Ministry of Personnel are all seniors. They have rich experience in doing things. You need to humbly ask for advice from all the adults. You must not be arrogant in front of your seniors. If I hear you say something to the adults, if you are not respectful, you will be served by the imperial staff. These words more or less comforted the dissatisfied adults. While everyone was silent, they couldn't help but feel worried about Her Majesty's ability to balance power. I don't dare beat a stick and give a sweet date. But they had to accept the stick obediently, and they had to accept the sweet dates obediently. Thunder, rain, and dew are all your grace. After Her Majesty the Queen ascended the throne, this thought became more and more profound. It would be better if no big things happened. Once big things happened in the court, they would feel this feeling more deeply. It was simply frightening and chilling all over. Go and do your work, Chu Qing Huang said. Fukang stays. I'll take my leave. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 436. The ministers quickly resigned and left, leaving only Chu Qing Huang and Fukang in the imperial study. Fukang Chu Qing Huang said softly, "This is your best opportunity to go out and gain experience and take charge. I believe you can do a good job." Fukang raised his eyes slightly and looked at her deeply. After a moment, he lowered his eyes and said, "Master, don't worry, this subordinate knows what to do." Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows. "I didn't show any reluctance this time." Fukang was silent for a moment and sighed, "I feel really reluctant to give up, but I know what my responsibilities are. For the sake of long-term stability and companionship in the future, I must be a good wife to my master." "Not bad." Chu Qing Huang couldn't help but raise her lips and praised him in a good mood. "Having this kind of knowledge is enough to prove your growth in the past 6 months. The plan to celebrate the New Year and Lantern Festival with the master is going to come to nothing." Fukang still felt a little regretful, then frowned and said in a bad tone, "This debt should all be placed on Beijiang's head. I can roughly guess what the Prince of Northern Xinjiang is thinking." Chu Qing Huang sat on a chair, holding his chin with one hand. Although Duan Muyu's whereabouts were secretive, he did not make any big splash when he came to Ziki, but he was trapped in Ziki. In fact, many people know about Qi, but there is no evidence on the surface. Fukang grunted, Duanmu is missing. Although the prince is a legitimate crown prince, his father's life and death are unknown, and there is no edict to pass on the throne. It is not legitimate for him to ascend the throne now. What if Duanmu goes back? His Royal Highness may also be labeled as a treasonous person who intends to rebel. These envoys from northern Xinjiang were overjoyed too early. The attitude of Her Majesty the Queen of Ziki is not important. What the Prince of northern Xinjiang is afraid of is the possibility of Duanmu returning in the future. Even if it is only 1 in 10,000, he cannot afford to bet on it. That's right, so he needs to accumulate prestige, manage his own power, and control the military power. Chu Qinghuang raised his lips and mocked, when he has the power, choose the right time to ascend the throne and become emperor. Who in the civil and military dynasties will dare to pick him? No. Even if Duanmu goes back, the new emperor, who has military power, can just make him an idle emperor. In the current situation, if the prince wants to take control of the military, he must find an excuse to start a war. This was the reason why he suddenly raised troops to conquer Ziki. Fu Kang's eyebrows were indifferent. Ziki is no longer what it used to be. As long as the northern Xinjiang cavalry dare to step into Ziki, their death is doomed. The corners of Chu Qinghuang's lips curled up slightly. You have courage. Fu Kang walked over, slowly took Chu Qinghuang's hand and put it to his lips. It's all the master's credit. Chu Qinghuang chuckled. Fu Kang was silent for a moment. Master, what do you plan to do with Duanmu? She is nothing to worry about, Chu Qinghuang said lightly. A woman who has no ambitions and no longer a violent temper has nothing to worry about on the premise that she has no advantages in brains or force. Under the current situation, no one can say what will happen in the future. As long as the two countries start a war, it will not end in a year or two. If Duanmu goes back at this time, he will have to face the situation of raging war and the dangers at any time. She will become the fate of a subjugated princess. So Chu Qinghuang can roughly guess how she will decide. I'm afraid Duanmu himself didn't expect that the prince of northern Xinjiang would act like this. Chu Qinghuang sneered. She arrived in Ziki on the front foot, and northern Xinjiang raised troops to start the war on the back. She simply wanted to kill her and the envoy. Don't blame Duanmu for saying he has no brain. Really no brainer. Therefore, he is destined not to be Qi Ling's opponent in this battle. Northern Xinjiang borders Ziki to the west and Dazhu to the east. If the two countries go to war, I don't know if Dazhu will have any ideas. Fu Kang unfolded the map on the case. The emperor of Dazhu has no ambitions, but he is the master. My nephew, if the master sends a message in hand, he should send troops to help Ziki. Chu Qinghuang hummed, I am also considering this issue. Fu Kang turned to look at her. The territory is too big, and it is tiring to govern, and all countries in the world should be balanced. If one party is dominant, ambition will arise sooner or later. If one party is too weak, the calm situation will be destroyed. So, balance is important. Chu Qinghuang curled her fingers. Fu Kang obediently knelt down in front of her, his movements natural and smooth. You are really smart. You have analyzed the world's situation so thoroughly. Chu Qinghuang pinched his face. You are indeed the person I like. Fu Kang was stunned. Compared to master, I'm still far behind. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 437. If Ziki and Zhou join forces and attack from both front and back, it will only take about half a year to destroy northern Xinjiang. This will not only save time, material and financial resources, reduce casualties, but also reduce the harm caused by the war to the people. However, in this way, the territory belongs to whoever conquers it, and Ziki will not be able to monopolize the northern territory. With the current national strength of Ziki, it is almost impossible to completely conquer the northern territory, so your idea is right. You can let Dazhu get a share of the pie. Chu King Huang's eyes fell on the map of the world. The northern territory will be destroyed, only the royal family of northern Xinjiang was destroyed. After the war, the troops were reorganized, the people were restored to life, the cities that were affected by the war were reorganized, the post-war casualties were dealt with, the damaged houses and fields were repaired, one by one, each one required a lot of effort. Amount of financial support. Although Ziki's economy is much better this year than in previous years, it must not only maintain all the military pay and food needed for the war, but also be responsible for post-war repairs, coupled with the sudden expansion of territory and millions of extra people, let alone the national treasury is unable to support it, and even manpower arrangements are somewhat inadequate. At this time, cooperating with Dezhou is the wisest decision. There is no need to ask my father to come forward. I will compile a letter and have it sent over. I believe that His Majesty the Emperor of Zhou will not miss this opportunity to expand his territory. Fukang nodded, Master Shengming. Chu Qinghuang smiled faintly, you proposed this idea first, and you should be the wisest person. Subordinates, well, what I mean is that they are all trained well by the master. Fukang was gentle and well behaved, so the truly wise person is still the master. Okay, everything you said is right. Chu Qinghuang stood up and walked out, come with me to have a meal. After filling your stomach, go to work quickly. Yes. I thought I could take a break at the end of the year, but unexpectedly the sudden war disrupted all plans. Fukang, Wenzhan, and Chu Suans officially started to get busy, walking between the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Households all day long. When the two countries are at war, food and grass must be provided, and subsequent armors, swords, and crossbows also need to be prepared. These are major events that cannot be delayed, and no one can afford to be negligent. Fortunately, Chu Qinghuang had the foresight to send Qi Ling to the border early to rectify the troops in northern Myanmar, so he could deal with the war calmly. After 3 to 5 days of preparation, the first batch of food and grass set off on the 6th day of the 12th lunar month. In addition to picking out 2,000 good men from the military camp, Fukang also arranged for Fufeng and Fuying to escort them along the way to ensure that the food and grass were complete. On the 3rd day of the 12th lunar month, a handwritten letter from Her Majesty the Queen was sent to Dezhou. In the middle of the 12th lunar month, another war report was sent to the palace. On the 5th day of the 12th lunar month, soldiers and horses from northern Xinjiang raided the Ziki military camp, and the war between the two countries officially began. Chu Qinghuang read the battle report and discussed matters in the recruitment department. One after another imperial edicts came out from Changming Palace, and the monarchs and ministers were busier than ever before. Some ministers did not go home until the palace door was locked every night. They entered the palace before dawn in the morning, but they did not look tired at all and were in high spirits. In excellent condition. Fu Wanchen couldn't stay with Chu Qinghuang all the time, and he couldn't even sleep in the same bed at night. Before the first batch of food and grass was shipped out, he didn't sleep much for 2 nights in a row, and didn't return until the night of the 6th day of the lunar month. Changming Palace took a nap. Chu Qinghuang didn't show that she felt sorry for him. She felt that this was a responsibility that a responsible man and even the future emperor of Ziki should take on. She could feel sorry for his inner sensitivity and inferiority and find ways to resolve it, but the responsibility could not be shied away from. That was what he must shoulder in the future. The important responsibility of the family and the country. Standing next to her, he will enjoy her favor and the glory of the royal family. At the same time, he must also have the ability to match it and shoulder the corresponding responsibilities. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 438. How have you considered the matter? Duan Muguio stood in the corridor of the palace garden, his voice without any emotion. You are a smart man and should be able to make wise decisions. Hong Yu reached out and grabbed the withered vines outside the corridor. I'm still young. Bigger than me. Hong Yu choked, my body is weak and I cannot withstand the abuse. I have changed my ways and will not destroy you. Hong Yu was silent. The fact that he is standing here today negotiating conditions with her is not really because of being threatened. Since this woman threatened him with that condition, it proves that she has no intention of returning to her original body. Otherwise, how could such an important thing be used? Negotiate with someone? What Hong Yu really cares about is the red thread held by Yu Lao. He is a sorcerer. He is not the best in astrology and divination, but he can calculate everything, but he can never calculate the results on himself. He has not yet experienced the movement of the red Luen star, but Qin Tianjian and his father Wan calculating it for him at the same time proves that this matter is probably close to 10, and there is no point in struggling. Kurha is not one to run away. Of course, it was impossible for him to just compromise and accept his fate. The conditions for negotiation must be negotiated, and the benefits that must be fought for, so that if there is a relationship in the future, it will be swallowed up to the bone and dregs, although secretly he always feels that it is impossible for him to have any feelings for Duan Muguiu. Even if she did, it was because she liked her beautiful face. If this look belonged to a kind, lovely, innocent little girl, he would probably be very happy to have a good marriage with her. It's just a pity. The other party is not a kind little fairy. Hong Yu sighed inwardly, but remained calm on his face. You know, I am not an orphan, but I have been pampered and well fed since I was a child, so I cannot bear any grievance. Duan Muguiu frowned, she is really delicate. Hong Yu sneered, there is no other way, it's just a precious life. Okay, Duan Muguiu said, you will have to eat in one bite. Hong Yu continued, I have thin skin and tender flesh, and I am also thin-skinned. I can't stand others beating me and scolding me. Duan Muguiu's expression was cold. Didn't I just say that I won't abuse you? Yes, Hong Yu nodded, I am the youngest child in the family, and I am used to being pampered. Do you want to be a male favorite? The corner of Hong Yu's mouth twitched, of course not. I like someone to pamper me unconditionally. Isn't it humiliating to be pampered by a man? Is this called pampering? Absolutely not. Duan Muguiu looked at him coldly, if there are any other conditions, I'll tell them in one go. Hong Yu then became serious and rude, the food must not be shabby, and the clothes must be silk and satin. You must be obedient to me. I am used to men being superior to women. You must do whatever I ask you to do. You cannot go against me or bully me, you can't hit me, scold me, humiliate me, don't scare me, if I don't want to do something, you can't force me. As he finished speaking word by word, the originally subtle expression on Duan Muguiu's face slowly faded away, his brows furrowed, and his eyes became extremely indifferent, as if he was looking at an idiot who was pushing his limits and thinking too much. Hong Yu caught her eye, paused slightly, and coughed unnaturally. Although my requests may sound a bit too much, they are all reasonable requests. You can agree or not. As the saying goes, if you ask for a price, you can't sit on the ground. If you pay back the money, the business cannot be done with justice. Are you the goddess of the immortal palace? Duan Muguiu looked at him calmly, do you want me to offer you 3 sticks of incense sooner or later? It's not necessary to make an offering. I'm not that unreasonable, Hong Yu hurriedly refused. He didn't have the life to enjoy being offered by others. In short, these are my conditions. You can also consider it. Duan Muguiu said nothing. Hong Yu turned to leave. When you figure it out, just tell me. Duan Muguiu said, Ziki and northern Xinjiang are at war. Hong Yu stopped and turned to look at her. Yeah, what's wrong? If Northern Xinjiang loses. There are no ifs. Hong Yu interrupted her with a particularly firm tone. Northern Xinjiang will definitely lose. Not only will it lose, but it will also be completely destroyed. Duan Muguiu did not argue with him and said indifferently, if Northern Xinjiang loses, Duan Muguiu will soon become the princess of the country. Hong Yu corrected him again, you put it too euphemistically. To be precise, you will become a slave to the subjugation of the country. Duan Muguiu said coldly, so how stupid are you to make so many stupid requests at this time? Hong Yu frowned, obviously dissatisfied, where is the stupidity? These requirements are very reasonable, okay. If I were you, at this time when the country in northern Xinjiang is about to be destroyed, I can completely use my own advantages to imprison the other party, whip, curse, humiliate, abuse, treat him like a cow. Hong Yu had a weird expression, so you are suggesting that I imprison you, whip you, scold you, humiliate you, abuse you at any time, and make you work like a cow or a horse for me. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 439. Duan Muguiu didn't mean that. She said indifferently, I'm just telling you how stupid you are. He doesn't know how to use the situation to gain his own interests. He only knows how to talk and talk. He is indeed a delicate little white flower who only looks good but doesn't use it. That head is also completely a decoration. 3 black lines appeared on Hong Yu's forehead. I have lived this long, and you are the first person who always emphasizes my stupidity. Girls should learn to be gentler, more virtuous, and more cute. You don't have any powerful martial arts yet. If you are pregnant and your mouth is so venomous, you will be beaten. Duan Muguiu looked at him expressionlessly. If you coax me well, maybe I'll be willing to protect you. Hong Yu's tone was sincere, just because of her face, don't think I'm weak, but I'm actually very powerful in martial arts. Duan Muguiu said calmly, so the frail body you mentioned just now doesn't exist at all? I don't have to show mercy to you. Hong Yu was choked to the point of speechlessness. After hesitating for a long time, he hesitated and said, that's not true. What I said just now is that I am weak. It's a condition I put forward that you are not allowed to bully me. If you don't want to agree, I'll stay away from you. Marriage can't be forced anyway. Marriage, Duan Muguiu's voice was still as cold as frost, and he asked expressionlessly, are you planning to marry a bright matchmaker? Hong Yu shook his head subconsciously, no. His current thoughts are still at the stage where Yu Lao is randomly pulling red strings, and he doesn't think that far ahead. 10 miles of red makeup, the matchmaker is marrying? Hong Yu felt cold for a moment, feeling that the woman in front of her was really not suitable to be a shy bride, but she was an upright man, and of course she couldn't be the one being married. So he felt that he and Duan Muguiu were not a suitable couple. Hong Yu decided not to tell Duan Muguiu for the time being that they were the fate of Yu Lao, otherwise she would become more and more unscrupulous and think that he and she must be a couple. Let's take a look at everything first. It's really not suitable. There is no loss if he withdraws in time. Hong Yu thought this in her heart, and then looked at Duan Muguiu's exquisite and refined face. The more she looked at it, the more she felt that this face was really beautiful, looking impeccably from the front and side. But why is her temper so bad? Hong Yu secretly cursed herself for being superficial, for being fascinated by her face. Tisk. Let's have dinner together tonight, Hong Yu suggested. Do you want to eat in the palace or out of the palace? Duan Muguiu frowned slightly, I don't want to go. Then we'll eat it in the palace, Hong Yu decided. After saying this, he was silent for a long time, not knowing what to say. Then he couldn't help but think of Her Majesty the Queen. The Queen and Fuekang both have indifferent and cold moods, but the way they get along with each other is very natural and warm, especially the cheeky Fuekang, who is afraid that others will not know that he is jealous. Every time I show that possessiveness, I don't feel disgusted. Hongyu cursed, and then came to the conclusion that this should not be a personality problem, but that he and Duan Muguiu were not compatible. Hongyu's eyebrows were tangled. What kind of red line did you Lao sign? Bringing two people with different horoscopes together is simply a mess. Your expression is very expressive, as if you are very dissatisfied with me. Duan Muguiu looked at him coldly, with a chill in his eyes. You are scolding me in your heart. Hongyu came back to his senses and met her cold eyes. Swearing is something only a shrew can do, and I am not a shrew. It's best if you don't scold me. Duan Muguiu's tone was as cold as frost. If I find you scolding me, I won't be able to spare you. You don't have to worry about flashing your tongue when you talk big. Hongyu stretched out his hand towards her, making a show of martial arts. Let's spar. Duan Muguiu frowned and looked at him expressionlessly. Kurha felt a little uncomfortable being looked at by her. Well, the original Duan Muguiu seemed to be in poor health. To say she was delicate was a polite and euphemistic way of saying it. To be precise, she was simply a sick child. The reason why His Highness was able to be reborn in her body was probably because the original body died of illness. No matter how much she nursed back to health during these days, it seemed impossible to have the same strong body and powerful skills as Chu Qinghuang before. Now sparring with her is obviously a bit of a bullying move. Hongyu coughed and calmed down. If nothing happens, I'll go back first. There are still things waiting for me to do in Kintian prison. How many years can Ziki survive? Duan Muguiu suddenly asked. Hongyu was stunned, thinking that she cared about her country, and replied, at least when Her Majesty the Queen is on the throne, Ziki will not perish. Is Northern Territory exhausted? Soon. What's the connection between you and me? Yu Lao led the wrong Hongyu blurted out, then realized something, frowned and looked at Duan Muguiu. Are you trying to trick me on purpose? After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 440. Duan Muguiu looked at him as if he were a fool. I thought you were so smart. Hongyu was furious. As expected, she was not a lovely woman, and her mouth was so damaged. Yu Lao pulled the wrong red thread. Duan Muguiu was silent, and he quickly understood something in his heart. No wonder Kuryu's reaction was so strange. He obviously didn't want to get involved with her, but he seemed to have some scruples, so it was destined to be fate. Duan Muguiu raised his gaze slightly and landed on Hongyu's face. It was different from the first time he met him. This man had lost some of his youthfulness. Although he was not as calm and restrained as an adult man, he had extremely beautiful appearance and bearing. Chia, at first glance, he is a noble son who comes from a wealthy family and has been pampered since childhood. Putting aside personality and temper, a good-looking face can at least bring you visual enjoyment and make you feel happy. Duan Muguiu didn't believe in fate before, but after experiencing all kinds of ridiculous changes, she discovered that some things were truly unimaginable by ordinary people. Only those who have experienced it personally can believe how bizarre it is. Therefore, if it was destined that she and Hongyu were in a red-stringed relationship, she would be willing to believe it, but believing was one thing, and whether she was willing to accept it was another. Duan Muguiu thought for a moment, then raised his eyes to look at Hongyu. Do you like my face? Hongyu was slightly surprised. Why do you ask that? You just say whether you like it or not. You do have a pretty good face. Hongyu squirmed. Good. Hongyu frowned. I think good character and good temper are more important. Would you like a faceless girl with a kind and good temper? Duan Muguiu's voice was light, and his expression was obviously a bit mocking. She is short, fat, with dark complexion and a few stars on her face. Maze, but she has a very kind heart and often does good things. Will you fall in love with her? Hong Yu's expression was stiff, and she said bravely, I think such a woman is pretty good. Duan Muguiu said calmly, do you need me to find one for you according to the standard? Hong Yu quickly shook his head, I don't dare to trouble you, so don't worry about it. Duan Muguiu looked at him calmly, and his eyes gradually revealed sarcasm, hypocrisy. This is not hypocrisy. Being kind-hearted is a good virtue, but it does not mean that you have to marry her. Men can also be kind-hearted. Is it possible for me to marry her? Hong Yu tried hard to regain face for herself. If a woman can having a beautiful appearance, a gentle temper, and a kind heart at the same time is perfect. This kind of woman can only be found in heaven. Duan Muguiu's expression was cold and his tone sounded a bit deep. If you need it, I can help you. A helping hand? Hong Yu frowned and stared at her pretty face. You mean to send me to see the king of hell? Sending you to the heavenly palace to find the little fairy in your dreams? Hong Yu. Duan Muguiu turned to look outside the corridor, thoughts flowing in his eyes, and after a moment, he said calmly, whether it is the wrong red line or not, you don't need to take it to heart. I have no intention of getting married, let alone having any feelings with a stinky man. Hong Yu. A stinky man? Besides, who knows who this red thread is for? Duan Muguiu said, it can't be said that she is the original Duan Muguiu. She has a good temperament. She has a frail body and a kind and gentle temperament. In addition to being a little weak and cowardly, other than that, there are no other shortcomings. It's a pity that she died. After saying this, she seemed to have no interest in talking to him anymore and turned around to leave. Hong Yu twitched the corner of his mouth, stared at her back, and didn't respond for a long time.